Hey, it's Toina with Destiny Education's Guiding Principle Bible Study. So glad to have you here tonight. Let me ask you something. When it comes to building a relationship with the Father through His Son, do you actually know what it means to have a relationship with the two of them? Do you know what it means to build a relationship? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. How to build a relationship with the Father through His Son. The first thing I want you to understand is this. Whether you see them as one individual and all three of them are unified, or you see them as three distinct individuals, that is something that you get to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You can see them how you choose to see them and how you have a relationship. The fact of the matter is that God is all about relationships. And the thing that He wants you to understand, and that always is necessary, is that you grasp that it's all about whether or not you accept the price that Jesus paid. You see, one of the hardest things for people to understand is that this walk of faith is not about what we do. It's not about doing something to earn salvation. It's about accepting a gift that the Son gave to us. It's about acknowledging that He came to this earth and volunteered to come and save us, that He volunteered to take that walk, that we accept that truth, and then we live our lives accordingly. So what does that look like? Well, let me tell you. Everything with a father begins with obedience. Obedience is better than sacrifice. He tells us that in Samuel. When Saul is king, this is what caused Saul to lose the kingship over to David. So Saul was king, and he was told to annihilate an entire group of people who had been deemed evil. You know, the reason we don't like that is because what we don't often understand is that there are some people who just are never going to fall in line. They will always be the children of their father, the devil. And we have a struggle with that because we think that God should love everybody. But the reality is that not everybody loves God, and God doesn't love everybody. And He clears that up very carefully for us in the Bible when He says, "What is it to you if I make one for life and one for destruction? You come follow me." There are some people who may have very well been made for destruction. You see, we like to think of everything in terms of us, right? We don't think outside of us. When we have to experience something, we think that, well, if it's good for me, it should be good for everybody. If this was done for me, it should be done for everybody. And that's just not the case. Number one, everybody doesn't learn the same way. Number two, everybody doesn't experience things the same way. And number three, everybody does not learn the same exact way. And I want you to understand that, because when people are given the chance to be their own individual selves, that's how God works with them. Now, when you say that to the religious folk, they go, "No, He doesn't work with people individually." Yes, He does. He does not violate His word for anyone. But as the creator of everything you see, while there are some people who choose not to accept the creative nature of God, those of us who have sense cannot deny how creative God is. There's much He can do, but there's something that we have to understand. Not everything is about us. He also has spirit sons. Those spirit sons we call angels. And I want to remind you that a third of them walked away from the God that they are in front of every day and every night. This isn't just about us. Sometimes what we go through is to teach them a lesson. Will this person continue to be faithful? Will this person continue to walk with me? And the fact of the matter is that's where your true answer comes in. We have to begin by understanding what it means to obey. When God tells you to do something, do it. When God tells us what to do, even after we know His voice and we refrain from doing it, it says a lot about you as a believer and you as His child. See, people don't disbelieve their parent, not while they're young. It's when they get older and they think that their parent let them down that a lot of times they start to make that break and they don't want to listen. When there's a hurt that hasn't been addressed, there's a million reasons why people suddenly decide that they need to fall apart and separate from their parents. The fact of the matter is that God never lets us down. We let ourselves down because we have expectations and we didn't go to God with those expectations in advance. Sometimes our job is just to do whatever He's asked and leave the results to Him. We have to always remember that with obedience, one plants, one waters, but God brings the increase. You see, that's the hardest part. When your job is to plant the seed, all you ever get to see is the seed going into the ground. You don't get to see what happens when the person comes along and waters it. You don't get to see what happens when that fruit begins to bloom. And that's where we really get caught up. And that's something that we all really need to work on, is understanding that we're either planting a seed, watering a seed, or waiting on God to bring the increase. And He's going to do that in His due time. Remember, nothing you do for God will ever come back void. He told you that in Isaiah 55, 9-11. My word will not return to me void. It will do everything I set it forth to accomplish. Let God be God. You see, one of the things that makes obedience so challenging for us is that we want to have control over what the outcome is, but we have to give freedom to God to be who He is. We don't see all things. In fact, Paul tells us in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 13, I believe it's verse 9, that we see through a glass dimly lit. You see, while we're on this side of heaven, everything we do is dimly lit. We are supposed to be iron sharpening iron. No one person knows more than another person. No one's knowledge is more valid than another's knowledge. What we have to understand is that all of it works together. You take what you can, you weigh it against the word, and make sure that it's factual. What happens and what prevents us from being obedient is that we get lazy and we don't want to do the work. So are you going to be one of those people who doesn't want to do the work? Because if you are, you've got to question whether or not you actually belong to Him. Because no matter what we do with God, we will always be working. Doesn't mean we can't play, but we will be working. Next, we have to allow our fruit to ripen in His time. You see, when you are working in obedience, the fruit isn't instantaneous. There are times when it will seem that it does, like you plant a seed on a Monday and Tuesday you have a harvest, but that is few and far between. This walk is a walk that requires a lot of waiting, a lot of calm, and a lot of patience. Oh, by the way, do not pray for patience. You automatically have patience built into every task and assignment that you get. Don't pray for extra hardships, because too often you put yourself in a position where you make things harder by doing that. You see, we have to educate ourselves on the things and the ways that God works. Every challenge we have is going to impact our ability to be patient and to wait. That's why God tells us, wait on God. We have to wait. The fruit is going to ripen because He already told us. Not only will His word not return to Him void, but that everything we do will be a success. In Psalms, He tells us we will be like a tree planted by the river. There's so many times throughout Scripture that the Father tells us we will be successful in due time, but we don't get to determine what that due time is. So you've got to train yourself to understand that you're running a marathon. I know that the world is working diligently to create a sprint-like feeling where you have to work and you have to run and you have to be faster than everybody else. But that's a lie. You don't have to be there. As a matter of fact, the more you calm down and let the process happen, the faster you will start working. The next thing I want you to understand is that when you get to the middle of a tunnel is always the darkest. You can't see. Once the light of the front is gone and there's no light at the end, the middle is pitch black. Make sure you have your lantern with your oil. Make sure you have your flashlight or your candle, because it's going to need to light the way. When it is so dark, it doesn't look like anything is ever going to change. This is vitally important, and too many people don't do this. And in the middle, they quit. And they always quit just before they would have seen the light. That's the thing I want you to understand. They always quit just before the light. And that is where the problem comes in. What is the next step in building a relationship? You have to believe what he tells you. You see, God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he should repent. When he tells you something is going to happen, it's going to happen. It might be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. It is going to happen. And that's the thing that we really struggle with. And it's no different than our brothers and sisters in the word struggled with. Let me remind you of a story. A man named Abraham and his wife Sarah. God promised them they were going to have a child. But that didn't happen in a year or 2 or 5 or 10. It was 25 years after he made that promise that they finally conceived. That promise came to Abraham when he was 75, but he did not see the child of promise until he was 100. We have to understand that God works outside of time. While he respects that we work in time, he also knows that we will be available as long as he deems us to. He also knows that we will be here on this earth until he calls us home. He can extend our life. He can shorten our life. But no matter what, when God tells you something, believe it is going to happen. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You know, Proverbs tells us hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when it comes, it's joy to the bones. The fact of the matter is that while you're waiting, you feel weighed down and hurt and saddened. But when things begin to happen, you always have to remember what God told you to carry you through. And I want to give you an example. An associate of mine recently had an experience where she had been told that there was a possibility that she was dealing with cancer. But God had warned her that this problem was coming probably 15 years ago, as an example. I don't remember how long it was, and I forgot to ask. Because he had already warned her it was coming, she knew it wasn't the worst case scenario. And so she trusted that. She didn't have any problems. When she got the results of the test that she needed to have done, it was not what everybody else feared. Living through that experience gave her the freedom to know that she hadn't lost her mind and that God had in fact spoken to her, and that what she knew to be true or to be an impossibility was because it didn't line up with what he had already told her. You see, we have to think, and that's the thing that really frustrates me, is that we live in a world today where everybody wants to make everything emotional. It's about feelings. It's about this, that, or the other, right? But it's never about thinking things through. Listen, God didn't tell us to build an altar so that we could live an emotional life. He told us to build an altar so that we could look at it and remember what he told us, when he told us, and how he told us. All of these are things that God has given us, tools that he has given us to help us remember through this journey, because he knew that for us, 30 years is a lifetime. There are some people who don't live to be 30, and he has us waiting for a promise for 3 decades. That's hard to hold on to. It's hard to walk in, but that's why you have to work to believe. When he tells you something is coming, something's going to happen, when he tells you what it is that your life is going to look like, believe him, and then begin to walk in that. Obey what it is he's given you. Always maintain yourself in those situations that involve that promise or potentially involve that promise in a manner that doesn't allow you to destroy the blessing he's bringing you. There are times when you can destroy something that God has told you There are equally as many times when he gives you grace as you make mistakes, learning how to deal with what you know is coming. These are all things that God does. All these things are proof that he is for you at all time, every time, all day. You have to remember that God is always for you. He's not out to do you harm. I know there are times when it feels like he is, but that's a lie. It seems like that because you have not yet developed a solid relationship with the Father and understanding who he is. Because if you understood who he is, you wouldn't think these things. It would just be impossible for you to believe the worst of someone who loves you so much. What does it do to us when we don't believe? It causes us to be insecure. It causes us to create misunderstandings of the word. It causes us to think ill of the Father. It causes us to believe that Jesus didn't die on the cross for us. It causes us to misunderstand the cross. It causes all sorts of negativity for you, and it causes dissonance inside of you that makes you uncomfortable, and it makes you question whether or not you're doing the right thing by hanging with the Father. These are all the things that happen when we choose not to believe that God is for us. The damage that's done is greater to us than it will ever be to him. He is going to love us no matter what, but the pain that we're going to live through ultimately will be significantly greater because of our inability to trust and believe that he is for us all day, every day. You have to know that God isn't playing a game with your life. He's not leaving you to hang. What he's doing is he's allowing you to start looking at your life and understanding where you are making mistakes. You have to be willing to ask the right questions, because when you're not willing to ask the right questions, you get the wrong answers. I want to tell you about a gentleman I know. Every time I talk to this gentleman, especially if it's on a Bible study day or a day when I'm getting ready to lead the Bible study, he goes half-cocked crazy. He gets all emotional. He ends up in these situations where he brings about nothing but chaos and confusion. But he will tell you till the cows come home that he knows everything there is to know about the Father. The reality is that his fruit does not show the same thing. And while I promise you 100% he will disagree all day, every day, the word is very clear. God is not the author of confusion. So where confusion ensues, God is not. And these are the truths that God gives us that we don't often want to understand. If God's not the author of confusion, why am I confused? Because there's something you don't understand. Because there's a truth that you're missing. There's something in what you're saying that isn't factual. There's something in what you're believing that isn't factual. The problem is that as the love of the greater number cools off, more and more people are believing the lie. And that's where the struggle comes in. You see, there are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing, and they look like they're trying to do right by us, but at the end of the day, they are only doing us harm. It's a challenge, and we have to begin to learn when God is separating us from those people and believe him when he says he is. Because when we don't believe him, we end up in harm's way. That's how we end up hurt, and that's how we end up in pain. When we believe, it empowers us. Let me tell you something. There is a freedom in believing God. Charles Stanley, my beloved Charles Stanley, who recently, it's been a while now, but he passed away. He used to always say, obey God and leave the consequences to him. Well, part of believing is obedience, because it's hard to obey if you don't believe someone. It is so much easier and so much more empowering to believe God and walk in what he says than it is to sit back and fight God and pretend like he doesn't know what he's talking about. It will give you a fight. It will give you an ambition, a drive, a motivation that you've never seen before. It will make you invincible, and it makes you fearless. Because when you get to the point that you believe and you jump, You start doing your work, and then you allow God to do his work. And you leave the consequences to him. Okay, God, this is what you told me to do. Now I'm going to do it. Let's knock this out. Let's move this forward. Let's go and do this, that, and the other. I love when God tells me to do something, just going and getting it done. But believe me when I tell you, I was that girl who God would be like, I want you to go do this. And I was like, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. No, I don't want to do that. No. And you would sit back, and what does he do? He waits. But then I would get this struggle, this like static in my spirit. Why? Because I knew I was supposed to be doing something, but I didn't want to do it. After years of walking with the Father, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? You're not going to stop asking me to do things. And it really is a waste of time for me to sit here and beg you not to make me do it. Let's just get it done and see what happens. And so I started getting it done. And sometimes things blew up in my face and I went, okay, you're going to have to figure that out. And so I'd move on to something else and I'd go and work on that. Meanwhile, he was taking care of whatever it was over here he wanted me to do, and I'm working over here and building this and doing da-da-da-da-da, and the next thing that happens is all of a sudden this fruit goes blazing high, and I'm like, oh, well, that was unexpected. And now I'm back over here, and I've got to a natural stopping point with this project. Now I can hire people to take it to the next level. So now, while they're getting it out there and taking it to the next level, and I'm back over here working on this, voila, everything works together. And so this flow and this favor all began to show itself when I chose to walk in belief. So when I sit here with you and I talk to you about how to work in belief, understand this: there's nothing that I am ever going to bring you that he has not already made me walk through first. And the reason is that he says the shepherd is the first partaker of the fruit. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand that, because a shepherd, God is very clear, usually shepherds are males. But he allows those of us women who he has a calling for to step forward and to have these conversations with people. It's fascinating to me. It is very unique, but there are some things, like I just said, I let God be God. I don't have to understand it, but I'm going to do what I've been instructed to do until he tells me to stop. I want you to reach a place where you are not afraid to jump in feet first, head first, and know that he has you. Every time something looks like failure, it's not failure. There's a number of things that God will keep for you, and he'll hold them in a holding pattern. It'll look like it's gone. It'll look like, but it's not. You just have to keep working. You weren't ready for this. He's got to grow you up a little more so that when you come back to this spot, because I want you to remember, everything about God is a circle. The reason he is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, is because when it comes to a circle starts at one point, goes all the way around, and ends at the same point. A lot of people don't understand that. Nothing is lost forever unless you give up and you quit. Don't quit. You got a long life to live and a lot to get done, no matter how long that life is. Keep moving forward, so that you're always ready for whatever the next task is. Finally, learn how to develop childlike faith. I want you to think about children. How do children experience the world? When a child is first learning how to crawl, what do they begin doing? Well, first, from newborn to a certain point, they just lay around. They can't move. But eventually they get to a place where they can roll themselves over on their stomach. And for us, that's nothing. But for them, that's huge, because that's the first time they've ever done it, which is why you'll often see kids roll. It's very cute. And then they get on their tummy and they start rocking. They're scooting. And then one day they start crawling. And then they start walking. How many times during that process does a child say, oh, I can't, it's too hard? They don't. They just do it. And they do it, and they do it until they get it right. And as long as no adult comes in and destroys that drive in them, kids will have that drive through most of their life, as long as you are willing to encourage it. So when they experience the world, they experience pain, they experience hardship, They learn from it. They learn what to do, what not to do, and then they keep moving. You see, in this day and age, it's harder to have childlike faith because when you put somebody in front of an iPad or an iPhone or some kind of electronic device, you take away their ability to do what is natural to human beings. You actually impede their growth and their development. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that to you either. Because what happens to children is not different than what happens to adults. When we put those screens in front of our face and that's all we focus on, we begin to lose our drive. We begin to lose our motivation. You see, children always have an expectation for success. They know that whatever they go try and do, they're going to be able to do. Sometimes they'll break bones, but think about skateboarders. How many times have kids broken bones trying to do tricks on skateboards? They go get it cast and they're back out the next day on a skateboard. Doesn't stop them. They keep it moving. You know, I have a dog. He's very cute. His name is Max. And Maxie is very funny to watch because when he's walking on the ice and he's running around in his favorite place and he's going for his walk and there's snow everywhere and there's ice and he's just he's just walking around and all of a sudden he slips and he's like, ooh, that wasn't fun. And then he keeps going. And then one time he slipped on ice and all four split and he got back up and he just went to walking. Never even fazed by the fact that he had slipped. Didn't make him scared. You see, when we reach a point that we think it's bigger than we are able to handle, we get scared and we pull away. That's not childlike faith. The beauty of childlike faith is that when we get scared, we keep pushing forward anyway. It's not that children are never afraid. Sometimes they're not. But the reason that they're not is because they have already proven to themselves more than once that when they're learning how to do something, sometimes it's hard, but they can overcome that. And as we get older and we go through more pain, we often forget that that is the reality. Sometimes we get hurt, but we keep going and we'll get better time after time after time again. And that's the thing I want you to understand. When you're developing childlike faith, remember, number one, no matter how scary it looks, it's never as scary when you're actually doing it. Number two, when you allow fear to stop you, that faith can't develop because you have caused a stumbling block, a roadblock on your own path. And number three, children always go back to do it again because they have already taught themselves that they can be better. When you are developing your childlike faith, remember those three characteristics of children because you're going to need each one of those to take you through the struggle. Finally, I want you to understand this. Children are never willing to quit. We often begin ready to quit. Now, there are some children who are born extremely cautious. Those children you have to coax along and you have to help them to understand that whenever they're trying something new, remember the last time they were afraid to do something and then they did it. And all of a sudden it turned out well. It wasn't as bad as they thought it would be. It's the same thing for you. When you reach a point that you are feeling done and it's over and there's nothing more, understand this, that it's always the moment at which you're ready to quit, that everything breaks wide open. And I want you to remember that because that's often how it works. If you will just remember these things, it will make sure that you make it through every struggle and challenge that you could potentially have. Finally, I want you to understand that the 3 steps I lay before you, they're a process. And the process is not complicated. You start with obedience, you move to belief, and you develop childlike faith. Once you are willing to be obedient and believe what he tells you, the childlike faith comes easy because you already know that God has you. You know that he's going to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. You already know you're going to be successful because he told you you would be. And now you just obey and you do what he asks you to do. It's a phenomenal equation and one that works well for everyone who chooses to follow his path without hesitation and without reservation. Will you be the one who actually obeys God, believes what he tells you, and works to develop childlike faith and to have fun with the things he sends you to? Let me know in the comments. If you love this video, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you know the next time we release new content. Please leave us some comments in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and let us know if we should bring anything else up for you. If you have any burning questions, we are excited to answer them. I'll see you next week.